During the next half hour or so, I will be introducing you to the Inside Phonics program. For this session, you'll need to have your Teacher's Edition in front of you. If you need to retrieve it, please pause the recording now. You can click to resume play when you have the book in front of you. You'll also want to have some sticky notes or tabs so that you can mark some of the pages that we're talking about. Inside Phonics is a program designed specifically for older students that builds fundamental reading and spelling skills in the context of highly interactive activities and lessons. You may already be using one of our core English Language Arts Intervention and English Learner programs at the middle school, that's Inside Language Literacy and Content, and at the high school, that's Hampton Brown Edge. Inside Phonics can be used with either Inside or Edge, or it may be used as a standalone program with students in need of phonics skills development. This session focuses on how to use Inside Phonics as a standalone program. Our goals for this session are to introduce you to the Inside Phonics components and resources for instruction. We'll talk about how to use the Inside Phonics placement test, and we'll discuss the Inside Phonics instructional path for teaching phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, and high-frequency words. And finally, we'll discuss using the Inside Phonics assessment tools to gauge student progress and mastery. Our overall goal for this session is to equip you to use Inside Phonics in your classroom right away. Let's take a look at the components of this program. In the front of your Teacher's Edition, on page Roman numeral 5, you'll see a list and the pictures of all the components. You'll want to tab this page. The sound spelling cards are 46 cards that are on double sides and provide clear photographic images to introduce sounds and their corresponding spellings to your students. Phonics and decoding transparencies are 92 full-color transparencies that visually engage students and introduce them to proactive decoding strategies. The teacher scripts are in a user-friendly spiral format for teaching with the transparencies at the overhead. Word and letter tiles are transparent tiles that you can use at the overhead to model blending, teach letter and word patterns and word structures, and provide students with practice building and spelling words. And finally, teaching masters are found on pages T220 and through T255 of your Teacher's Edition and can be used with the word and letter tiles to introduce and practice the high-frequency words. Be sure to spend some time exploring each of these components after completing this online session. In addition, there are songs and sounds CDs that provide audio support for the phonics and decoding lessons. The assessments are found in the Teacher's Edition on pages TT257 through 297. These are assessments for concepts of print, phonemic awareness, phonics and decoding, and word recognition. We'll go into these in more depth in a few minutes. There are also write-on, wipe-off boards that are double-sided boards with erasable pens that enable students to respond to lessons in writing by writing and spelling words. It's a very interactive tool. There's also a Word Builder CD-ROM. This highly interactive resource offers you an electronic version of the letter and word tiles for instruction or practice using a computer. It includes all the phonics and decoding transparencies too. Your school may have also purchased the Inside Phonics workbook. If that's the case, you'll want to use that to provide each student extensive skills and practice and repetition of the skills that are being taught. Again, be sure and spend some time at the end of the session familiarizing yourself with each of these important components and resources. For now, let's talk about how to get students placed into the Inside Phonics program. very important that your students are correctly placed into the program so that they can experience success. The placement test for Inside Phonics is comprised of 45 multiple-choice items that test your students' mastery of letter-sound correspondences and of words that contain phonetic and structural elements included in the program. Why don't you open your Inside Phonics Teacher's Edition to page T267 and go ahead and put a tab on this page. This is the placement test. You will have students complete the placement test on the first day of instruction. You'll need to copy the 8 pages of the test for all of your students. It's very important to use this test with all students prior to beginning the lessons so that you're sure that you're meeting your students' learning needs. You may want to pause the recording and take a quick look at the placement test pages. Did you notice that the items become more difficult as they progress? That's so that we can place students appropriately into their skill level. Now let's take a look at page T279 and tab it. This is where you'll find the scripts. This is where you'll find the scripts to administer the test. It's all there for you to make it very easy. The answer key is there as well to make it very easy to score it. Note that it's okay to name the pictures so that students can target the sounds, which is especially helpful for English learners. Now let's talk about how you score the test. There are multiple placement points in Inside Phonics. The Inside Phonics placement test provides 3 placement points to meet your students' needs. However, if your students are pre-literate or emerging readers, for example, if they're newly arrived English learners, you'll want to start with the foundations of reading lessons that come at the beginning. We'll go over those in depth in a minute. If your students have initial letter and sound skills, you'll start with lesson 1. If students have some literacy skills, they can start with lesson 33 before the work on long vowels begins. And finally, when you have students with a bit more advanced literacy skills, but who still need work on the more in-depth skills of diphthongs, variant vowels, and consonants, and multisyllabic words, you're going to start at lesson 92. This is the profile and placement chart on page T275. You'll probably want to put a tab on this page as well. Here you can see the objectives and the skills that are tested at each of the placement points. Now let's take a look at how you use these different placement points. First, I need to have you cross out the reference to page 308 at the top of the page. It's incorrect. It's been fixed in later versions of this program. Let's focus on the chart. Placement point 1 is with letters and sounds, short vowels, and blends and digraphs. Placement point 2 tests long vowels, endings, and R-controlled vowels. And placement point 3 tests the more complicated skills of silent consonants, hard and soft G, multisyllabic words, prefixes, and suffixes. The good thing to remember when you're looking at placing your students is a cut score of 80%. You will start at the section where your students did not reach 80%. We're going to take a look at some examples to help this make sense. When you're testing your students, you're going to want to fill out the class profile chart. This is on page 276. You'll probably want to put a tab here as well. You can see that this allows you an opportunity to put your students down the left-hand column, and then in the boxes you can put a plus to indicate whether or not they've mastered that particular objective. This is going to be really helpful when you're trying to group your students for the most appropriate instruction. You can see that the objectives for placement point 1 are first, placement point 2 come next, and finally placement point 3. You'll get a nice overall class profile once you've completed this profile chart. Now let's look at some examples. This student, for placement point 1, got all of the letters and sounds correct, most of the short vowels, and half of the blends and digraphs. So they mastered this section with 87%. At placement point 2, they got the long vowels mastered. The other ones are a little bit less. They got 60% there. I bet you can already figure out where we're going to start with this student. And then they attempted some of the placement point 3 objectives. Can you figure out where this student will start instruction? You're right. Since this is the first time where they scored less than 80%, we will start with lesson 33, or placement point 2. Let's look at another example. Again, the student did very well with the objectives in placement point 1. They did very well in placement point 2. And then they didn't do so well yet with placement point 3. Where will this student start? You're right. The first place they scored less than 80% is at placement point 3. So you would start with lesson 92. Let's look at yet another example. This student didn't do a score at 80% on placement point 1. In fact, they did not even attempt the blends and digraphs items. They attempted a few of the other items, but as you can see, their scores did not reach the 80% mark in any of the objective areas. Where would you start with this student? You're right. This student would start with lesson 1 because they did master a few of the objectives, and this is the first place where they didn't get less than 80%. Finally, let's look at an example where we would start at the foundations of learning or reading lessons. This student didn't master any of the objectives, so we would start with the foundations of reading lessons. Are you getting the concept? I think so. Let's take a look now at the lesson flow. The foundations of reading lessons are for students who do not already have the skills addressed in this section. This is where you'll start instruction with students who have not mastered any of the phonetic skills as shown on the placement test, or if they are beginning English learners, newcomers, students who haven't mastered these skills, students who have already, mastered these skills will go directly to lesson 1. So let's remember the fundamental elements of phonics instruction. We have phonemic awareness, phonics and decoding, and spelling skills. For students who are starting at the beginning in English, the lessons in this section will help you build the foundational skills of reading. That's the consonant sounds and spellings, the short vowel sounds and spellings, and high-frequency words that are most common to the English language. The foundations of reading instructional path consists of high-frequency words. You will model a lesson, there are word lists, and there are practice sentences for you to use. And then phonics and decoding with sounds and spelling combinations of consonants and short vowels, and then blending words practiced. And finally, you will monitor your students' progress to make sure that they're picking up the skills that they need. Let's look at the components that you'll use for these lessons. If you're following along in your teacher's edition, you can find page F4, or F3, excuse me. Your district may not have purchased the practice books, so you can use the teacher's annotated edition that came with your Inside Phonics kit to get the same idea. One of the things that we're building in the high in the Foundations of Reading list are the high-frequency words. The Foundations of Reading organizes 91 of the most basic high-frequency words into 15 sets of instruction. You can find corresponding pages in the practice book to support each list of words. Notice how each list has a corresponding set of phonics lessons that go with it. You'll want to make sure you teach the words and the sounds together. Excuse me, this keeps jumping ahead of me. You're going to have the student read the words from each list while you record their success. This is so that you can check to see where your students are. You can use it as an assessment tool. If the student reads all or most of the words correctly, you can go on to the next word list. And then you can repeat that until you find where a student has missed 5 words in a row. That's where you can start your instruction in the Foundations lesson. There's a model lesson for how to teach high-frequency words. Find page F5. You're going to want to use this instructional routine to teach the high-frequency words. It's really helpful for students to learn and follow a set routine. That way they can focus on the words, not on how to learn them. The routine goes as such. You teach the words by introducing the new words, looking at the word first, having students listen to the word, having students listen to the word in a sentence, having students say the word, having students spell the word, and then finally having students say the word again. For step 3, listen to a word in a sentence. There are lists and sample sentences right on the page for you to use, so you don't have to make anything up on the spot. To practice the words, you're going to have students build sentences, and you can model this for them at the overhead with the letter and word tiles. Then you're going to have them practice the spelling and then practice on their own. The Word Builder CD-ROM is a great tool to have students practice their high-frequency words. The installation is very quick, and since it's not licensed, it can be done on as many computers as you'd like. There are many features here of the Word Builder that you'll want to know. First of all the transparencies are listed. So you click on the transparency and the appropriate words and letter tiles show up. The high-frequency words are down here, and you can scroll through or click on the word and drag it to the work mat, and it underlines the words up here once you do that. Or you can have students build the words by clicking on letter tiles and dragging them up to build the word. They can match the word that you have built for them or that they have put up there and then built. It's just a fun, interactive, and very useful way for them to practice their word skills. Here's an example. The sentence, the letter tiles to make the word, and the actual word itself. Students love to use the Word Builder. I know you'll find lots of ways to integrate it into your instructional time with them. Next, students begin the phonics and decoding lessons. For these lessons, you will follow a routine for introducing and practicing sound spellings. You'll find these in your teacher's edition on the lesson page. In addition, all of the routines are also found at the front of your teacher's edition, in pages Roman numeral 5 through Roman numeral 12. All of these lessons follow a similar path. You teach and practice. This is when you follow the step-by-step instruction with the routine. And then you have students you practice on their own. I'm sorry, I've messed up. I'm going to go back a minute on this one. Excuse me. Okay, this is an example with the sound S. The purpose of step 1 is to help students listen to the sounds of English. So it's important that you don't use the sound spelling cards until you get to step 2, which is on an upcoming slide. The reason for this is that we want to help students develop their phonemic awareness. We want them to focus on the sound, not the symbol of a letter. So step 2 is now where we help them identify the sound with the spelling. So in this case, we're working with the sound S, and the letter that spells it is S. But as you can see, there are also other ways to spell that sound. For each sound, you'll work through step 1 and step 2 before you move to the next sounds. So steps 3 and 4 are where you blend sound by sound and then spell sound by sound. There's also an opportunity to apply their skills with the decodable text in the practice book once you get to this point. Once you've introduced the students to each of the sounds and spellings, you will use the scripts and the transparencies to help students associate the sounds and the spellings and give them opportunities to practice blending the sounds and making words. So, just like we did in the introduction of the sound and spelling, we begin with the teach and practice steps. Oops. Below is the image of the transparency, and then you'll find the script for using this transparency to model the instruction. You begin with oral practice to develop the phonemic awareness. Then you associate the sounds and spellings. And finally, you complete the guided practice in step 2, so students have an opportunity to practice what they have learned on their own and in their practice book. In addition to the placement test, Inside Phonics has some additional assessment tools to help inform your instruction and check your students' progress. You'll find these listed on page TF28. The phonological and phonemic awareness assessment is very useful to help you figure out which of the skills that your students have and still need. The concepts of print assessment is a nice checklist that you can use with print materials in your classroom to see how well the students understand the concepts of print of the English language. The high-frequency words can be copied and used as a checklist. You may want to laminate a sheet for students to refer to. It's just a great tool for you to use over and over to see how well students have mastered the skills. And then finally, Progress Check 1, which you'll use at the end of the Foundations of Reading lessons, is the Foundations of Reading test. This covers the skills that you have taught in the Foundations of Reading lessons. We don't have time in this online webinar to go through each of these in depth, so please take some time after the session is over to familiarize yourself with the assessment tools. It's really important to monitor students' progress so that you're giving them the skills that they need. Let's take a look now at where we start with the Placement Point 2 and Placement Point 3 instruction. That's beginning with Lesson 1 and moving throughout all of the lessons inside Phonics. Remember, Placement Point 2 starts at Lesson 33 with long vowels. If your students are weak in their high-frequency words, you can start with Lesson 31. You can use the high-frequency words list to assess where your students are, or you can give all of your students a heads up and start with the high-frequency word list. Many English learners will need work on high-frequency words, but you can always use the assessment to decide. Placement point 3 starts at lesson 92 before you get into the vowel digraphs and diphthongs. But again, you can start with the high-frequency words of lesson 90. Now we're going to go through the instructional path, which is the same whether you're starting at placement point 2 or placement point 3. Again, if you look at this list, it goes over the flow of the lessons. You can see the scope and the sequence of the skills as they're developed. Placement point 1, we go over letters and sounds, short vowels, get up to blends and digraphs. Then we move into long vowels, getting into word patterns. And then finally we get into the diphthongs and variant vowels and multisyllabic words. So let's talk about the instructional path, which is consistent throughout. As we saw in the table of contents, the path begins with high-frequency word instruction. Then students receive instruction in various phonics and decoding skills. They learn the sound, the spelling, they practice blending words, and they take a look at word patterns. We also focus on word structure. And then we put it all into practice with decodable text and books for independent reading and reading fluency practice. And as always, we review and we monitor students' progress. Let's look more closely at the instruction for teaching the high-frequency words. The flow of introducing new words stays the same throughout the lessons. You can find Teacher's Edition page T54 for this spread. Take a look at the Introduce New Words routine. Do you see how it is the same as in the Foundations lessons? Now, when you're introducing a new word to your students, do you ever have a problem coming up with a good sentence or a student-friendly elaboration? Notice at the bottom of the page, it's already there for you. Sentences and then elaboration. Makes it very easy for you. There's also nice practice indicators, the icon at the bottom of the page that gives you a page to refer to practice those high-frequency words. Let's take a minute to look at these activities. The write-on, wipe-off boards, or WOWOs, are a great tool for students to practice and stay actively involved during lessons, and for you to monitor their progress during each lesson. You can also have students use the Word Builder CD-ROM for additional practice with high-frequency words. This page should also look familiar from the earlier lessons in the Foundations section. The first step in teaching and practicing the sounds and the spellings is to teach the sound, have students listen. Whoops, this keeps jumping ahead of me. I apologize. We start with the phonemic awareness. It's important to remember that phonemic awareness focuses on the sounds, not the print, so that you will notice that we don't display the sound spelling cards until step 2. For some reason, that slide would not build for me. Going back yet again. Okay, and then in steps 3 and 4, students blend the words, blend the sounds, and then spell sound by sound. It's just as we went through before. Next, we blend and spell whole words using the transparencies to model and practice. The script is replicated in your Teacher's Edition below the thumbnail of the transparency. You'll also want to notice the language supports that are provided for you throughout the lessons. This gives you an extra advantage in helping students understand more complicated meanings and pieces of our language. You'll want to take some time to flip through the next couple of pages and look at the various types of transparencies that you'll be using. Finally, students apply what they have learned by tackling decodable text. These are passages throughout the practice book and the tear-out, fold-up books that you see spread out here. You want to take a minute to look over the 4 different ways to read and have students practice each way. On the left, you can see each of the goals for the different types of reading. So we have whisper reading, partner reading, which helps students sum up the meaning and provides them an opportunity to practice in a low-key setting, and then group reading, and then choral reading. At the end of each group of lessons, you will find a review for that group of lessons. Again, there's a script provided. Notice the letter tiles that will be used with this lesson. It identifies them for you so you can have your resources ready when you're teaching. You're going to explain to your students that, I'm sorry, I read the wrong words. Okay, once you've seen all of the steps in the placement point 2, which are the lesson plans that we've looked at here, you'll also be familiar for lesson point 3. So we have high frequency words, phonics skills, application, which is independent reading, practicing their fluency, reviewing and spelling. The instruction for placement point 3 lessons follows the same path. We're going to take a look at a few of those lessons. Now we're going to blend and spell whole words using the transparencies to model and practice. Let's revisit the different types of assessment tools you can use to keep your track of your students' progress, whether they started with foundations, lesson placement point 1, 2, or 3. In addition to the ones we've already discussed earlier with the foundations lessons, which is the concepts of print and the phonological and phonemic awareness test, there are also decoding words or high-frequency lists. Going back a second. That is not right. There are also high-frequency word lists and decoding word lists that are quick and powerful assessments. They are found on page T277 and T278. You'll want to give a copy of the list to each student and then keep a copy for yourself so you can mark which ones the students successfully read or have trouble with. You want to look for patterns in their mistakes, and if a student makes several mistakes in words with the same target skill, you can go back and reteach the appropriate lessons. Now let's take a closer look at the progress checks that come at the end of each group of lessons. The progress checks measure students' cumulative decoding skills and knowledge of high-frequency words as they move through the program. These begin on page T283. As you can see in the Year Event Summary profile sheet, each of the progress checks tests the different skills objectives for decoding and word recognition, initially for letters and sounds. And then you can track their skills over time. Okay, we've taken a whirlwind tour of Inside Phonics, but my hope is that we familiarized you with the key instructional elements. You'll definitely want to go back and take some time to go deeper into the instructional path and to familiarize yourself with the components and resources. But you should now be equipped to use the Inside Phonics resources and components, to use the placement test to place your students appropriately into the lessons, and to follow the lesson path for teaching phonemic awareness, phonics skills, decoding, and high-frequency words with Inside Phonics. And you should be familiar with using the Inside Phonics assessment tools to keep track of your students' progress, identify skills they've mastered, and identify skills that they may still need some work with.